Okay, hi everybody. I think I've met most of you, but not all of you. My name is Kraaijvanger, and I'm the founder of the Hivery. I'm thrilled to have you guys here tonight. I'm thrilled to have Lisen with us tonight. I think tonight's conversation is really important, and I think it's top of mind for many women as we explore our next chapters and try to navigate all of the changes and life stages that we go through. I wanted to tell a quick story about Lisen and I before I formally introduce her. About 3 years ago, she and I had coffee in Sausalito, and this book and this idea was at its very early stages, and the Hivery and its idea was at its very early stages. So 3 years later, we are very excited to.
And we didn't plan the color. We're like,
our branding looks good together, which we're thrilled. But I was laughing when I remembered that story because I realized, like, if there were ever two women that were actively exploring their next chapters and very, energized in our conversation about what that could mean. And 3 short years later, we've both done some things that I know we're really excited about. So, Lisen started out, and she'll tell you much more about her background. But she started out as an author and advertising executive. When she had her second child, she decided to opt out in a way that surprised even her. She was not expecting that. She then went on to, after taking her pause, which she'll tell you more about, she has gone on to do some amazing things, including write this book, The Work Postcard, which I'll show you my copy. It's all marked up. She wrote this book. She has spoken at TEDx. She has spoken at South by Southwest. She's been a key speaker and leader with the 3% conference. And she's doing amazing things in this space of advocating and researching for women about finding our next chapters. So Lisen, I'm so thrilled that you're here. Bravo. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
It feels like coming home to me. I grew up in Mill Valley, so this is just perfect.
I meant to say that. She grew up in Mill Valley. She went to Old Mill and Mill Valley Middle School.
Yep. And then Prop 13 hit, and so I went to Branson.
So it's like a homecoming. Yeah. She's back. But where I thought we would start tonight, there's a couple things I wanted to tell you before we start. One is that if you've been to the Hivery before, you know that all of these evenings are a conversation. We're not here to present to you. We're here to have a dialogue with you. So we will save some time later this evening for the Q&A, but don't save your question for the Q&A. If you have a burning question or thought or idea or whatever it is, please feel free to chime in, shout out, engage, interact. You don't have to wait for the Q&A. You also don't have to wait for any sort of break to get up if you want to grab some water or some food or need to step out. The space is yours, so we want you to be comfortable. We want you to feel very much at home. The restroom.
Just wait for the mic, though.
Yes. If you have a question, Stas would love it if you wait for the mic so that we can record your question. We are recording this video, so you'll be able to see it later and share it with your friends. After the Q&A, Lisen will be doing a book signing, and you'll have a moment if you want to introduce yourself individually or ask Lisen any questions, and she'll likely be doing that in that back corner there. Did I tell you the restrooms? Restrooms are right up there. I said that already. I think it's really important in a conversation like this that, again, for those of you that have been to the Hivery before, you know that we are a very warm and welcoming community. My commitment to this place and space is that we welcome women in all stages, across all chapters of life, across all industries and interests and talents. And so my interest is celebrating every woman. So with this conversation, I want you to come into it knowing that regardless of where you are and what you want and what you're looking for and whatever you're exploring, it is welcome in this conversation. And there's never judgment. There's never, any sort of expectation. No pressure. So let's get started. I have a couple of questions for Lisen so she can tell us about the book. And like I said, please chime in. But the biggest question I wanted to start with is how did this start? How did this exploration of what it means to pause and then thrive? How did that start for you?
Well, if you ask my husband, it started about 35 years ago. Literally, I think as I was graduating from college, there was that question of how do you, navigate all of this? I really wanted to, I got my first job at 14 at Swenson's ice cream parlor over where Whole Foods is. I lied and told them I was 16. And I literally worked every day all through college, after college, went on to get my MBA, and I literally thought I was going to be the one to break through the glass ceiling. And I've broken through my own glass ceilings, but maybe not that glass ceiling. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But long story short, Lean In came out. And I was so inspired by what Sheryl Sandberg had done, creating a movement to talk about women's careers and women's ambition and what women can do. I felt that there was something missing in the conversation. And for me, what was missing is this narrative around caregiving and motherhood. Now, when that was all happening at the same time, I found, when I was discovering in my research, in my journalism, that so many very successful women had actually privately, quietly downshifted or paused their careers. But you couldn't find it in their resumes. If you looked at a LinkedIn profile, it wasn't there. It was hidden. For many reasons, they were either denying it, meaning they didn't even want to acknowledge it, or they were hiding it. In the book, I tell 2 stories of very, very senior executives who told me, "Oh, that's a great book for stay-at-home moms." And I said, "Well, tell me about your career path." Come to find out, each of them had paused for like 2.5 years. Isn't that a pause? But they didn't own it. For them, They felt the need to deny it. And so I knew that there was something kind of going on here. And so I literally got inspired to find out. And Diablo Magazine, do you guys know about Diablo Magazine? It's the Marin Magazine's sister magazine for Diablo community. The editor-in-chief's really a forward-thinking woman, and she approached me and said, "I think there's something happening here around women's careers, just as Lean In came out. Would you do some research?" So I ended up meeting a group of women in the East Bay called the BOMs, Business Owner Moms, and they're sort of almost a precursor to the Hivery. And I learned about their nonlinear career paths. And to me, that was like, okay, there's really something going on here. I saw this in corporate America, how women were doing it and hiding it. I saw it, for women who are entrepreneurs, being out and proud, and I knew there was a journey. And so I started doing research. I interviewed 186 women for the book. Then I discovered that I'm a data geek, right? We're in Silicon Valley, we gotta have data, right? So I wanted to find contemporary research about women's careers and how we're navigating it. There's a really fascinating study out of the Center for Talent Innovation out of New York. They've done a hidden brain drain task force study. The first one is in 2004, the second one is 2008. That's light years away from where we are now, given what's happened with technology and, Gen X women maturing, et cetera. So I wanted a modern study. It doesn't exist. So I hired a market research firm to do a study. And I partnered with a professor out of Hunter College who's an expert on this issue. And I said, okay, help me make this, I want this to be valid. She said, if you can get 250 people responding to the survey, this is awesome. 1,500 women later, within 2 weeks, I had to turn it off because I thought, okay, we'll just do this thing on the side. Women want to tell these stories. Everywhere I go, we want our truth to be told about how we are being trailblazers and innovating. And anyways, I could go on for hours.
And how we're sorting it out, right? On our way to being
yes.
trailblazers and innovators,
Yes.
there's a lot of
steps along the way
and things to figure out.
Absolutely right.
I love the title. It's very clear on the path that we all want to get to the thrive, right? That's the piece that we're all excited about. But let's talk about what it means to pause.
Yeah.
What's your definition of pause?
So it was really interesting. I asked the women, what's your definition of pause? So one woman who worked at Boston Consulting Group, one of these high-powered consulting groups who was working 80-hour weeks said, well, I paused. I went down to 40 hours, right? God bless her, right? For her, that was a pause.
Right.
Other women I interviewed, I spoke to many incredible women who had paused for literally over decades. And one woman who had paused and then did a returnship program, which we can talk about at length at Goldman Sachs. I think it was Goldman. No, it was JP Morgan. A year afterwards, I said, well, how about your pause? Well, it was 15 years, but no one knows because they don't care because they care about what I'm doing today.
Right.
So pausing for me really came down to what is it for you? How do you define that pause? The way I guess I define it is when in your life are you taking your career off the front burner and putting your caregiving, family responsibilities, or personal priorities to the front burner. So that's the way I look at it.
I love it. Love it. We wanted to just take a second to get an idea in the audience of what draws you here. And I'd love to know who here is pre-pause, is thinking about what it would be like to pause, or thinking about what life might be like to pause. Okay, great. And who here is in their pause? And okay, awesome. And who here might be in a pause and looking to re-enter or create a new chapter? You can keep raising your hand if it keeps applying to you. You can just keep your hand up the whole time. I'm working, I'm pausing, I'm looking. All good.
I'm pivoting.
It's all good. And who here has paused and made that next chapter re-entry? Awesome. So we've got a mix of everyone, which makes me really happy. That also leads to engaging conversation for all of us. What we wanted to do, and Lisa and I talked about this before, we really want to make sure that we're covering things in the book that are useful to you. I found there to be a number of, I have to say, like, I'm not a data geek, and I loved how much data there was in the book, because I feel like it's the right blend of the emotion that we go through as we make change, and the data that supports what we're doing as women, and this whole movement that women are creating to recreate the way we look at work and how we can re-enter, how we can pause and re-enter. Let's talk about, so you defined pause, but I know in the book you talk about the different paths of pausing. Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah. So again, you know, I had a lot of people I'd spoken to and a lot of research from the survey that we had done. There were two requirements in the survey. You had to have children and gone to college. And the reason I created that definition, I really want to make sure we have a conversation about what pausing means for different socioeconomic levels in our society. It's really important because it's very interesting and fascinating, actually. But anyways, I wanted that because I was thinking, if you had the resources of having gone to college, how did you navigate your career then, right? What did that look like? So for me, you know, if we're looking at female leadership and we wanted to understand that, for me, I really wanted to understand what had happened to college-educated women, the ones who we would think would be, you know, breaking through all the class ceilings. What I learned was, and let me be clear, yes, we live in a place where many of us have resources, or there are resources, and so maybe in our community we'd think more people than somewhere else would pause. I was astounded to learn that while only 11% of the survey respondents planned to pause their career, 72% had paused their careers. So the vast majority of women, college-educated, high-caliber women, in fact, 61% had graduate degrees. So these are really ambitious, directed, committed women, had paused their careers. And that, to me, was fascinating because that said to me, there's something going on, and we can talk about the workplace and all of that. But the next question, of course, was, okay, you paused, then what happened afterwards? And 89% had relaunched. So that was really interesting. So 89% had relaunched, and what I did was then try and unpack, okay, how did they do it? What were their paths? What happened? And I really discovered there were sort of four essential paths. There were the 28% who never paused their careers. And when you kind of drill down to why they never paused their careers, there were three key drivers. One, they found such deep meaning in their work that they couldn't imagine. Now, this isn't true for every one of them, so this is kind of a compilation. They were so fulfilled by what they did that the allure of, you know, the passion that they also felt for their children, they didn't feel guilty. They're like, I don't feel guilt. I love what I do every day, which isn't right. That's the dream. So there was that group. There was also, and again, they could be all three of these things. They also had workplaces that allowed them to have flexibility. They never felt guilty for leaving to go take, you know, their little daughter to whatever, the soccer game or the dentist appointment or whatever. They were never penalized or felt penalized, I should say, for their choice to do that. The third thing is many of them, 40%, were the primary breadwinners in their families, which meant their partner either didn't work at all, you know, was completely out of the paid force. Mostly he, was pausing, or the partner had flexible hours. So they may have had a job that was much more demanding in terms of hours, but they had a partner who had more flexible. So when you have those dynamics, you don't need to pause, right? Because you got it going on. Well, what about the rest of everybody else who didn't?
And that was 28%.
That's 28%.
Okay.
So that was the one group that never paused. And I think that's got, you know, you could do a whole book on that alone. Then we had the three groups who did pause. So, and then relaunched. So there was the one group I call cruisers. These are women who actually stayed in the workforce by downshifting to work part-time. Most of them actually stayed at their same companies and negotiated part-time gigs with their companies. So one woman here in Silicon Valley, Karen Catlin, who's just recently retired and has got a new phase, she's pivoting again. She was at Adobe and said to her boss, I really want to downshift. I've got 2 kids. I really need to be around. And her boss was like, great, you do that. For 10 years, she worked part-time. And then the boss said, okay, I would love to put you in line for a huge opportunity. She said, I'm ready, went back. She rose up the ranks to be VP working in the office of Chief Talent Officer. Never was affected and hurt by that. And those were stories I saw again and again. Lisa Williamson, who's currently an EVP at Wells Fargo, was another scenario just like that. So we saw these women navigate to work part-time and then were able to, within their own companies or in their own professions, if you will, relaunch to great success when they were ready. Interestingly, they had the highest life satisfaction. 83% were really fully thrilled with their life choices and their paths. I thought that was really fascinating. So those are cruisers. The boomerangers, women who had completely left the paid workforce and then re-entered back to their same profession, same industry, same whatever. They're the ones, and that was about 35, 40%. They're the ones who actually suffered what I believe is they're the ones we hear about. Oh, you can never get back in. It's really hard, because they were re-entering and they understood the loss. So if I paused and Grace didn't, I saw that Grace would continue up her career path. I would see that she was making that much more money. She'd had this much more accomplishments. And I've taken out 10 years and I come back in and all of a sudden, or 5 years or whatever it is, and I come back in and it's easy to track the difference and what's going on.
Right.
The other thing that many of these women experienced was this sense of, well, your skills are dead. Right? You've been gone for this period of time, your skills are dead. So there was a lot of bias around that when there was this effort to re-enter exactly the same path.
But and I know that I want you to keep going.
Yeah.
But because I hear that, and I want to make sure we touch on some of the things, because I hear certain things as women are considering re-entering a lot. And one of the things I hear is, my skills aren't current. But then I find that 4 weeks later with like a social media brush up, they're current.
Bingo.
So can we talk about that?
Yes. It was just amazing. So 66% of all the women who re-entered were able to re-enter within 6 months. So they were able to find a job within 6 months.
I want to make sure everybody gets that, because that statistic really rocked my world a bit.
Yeah.
So 66%.
Within 6 months, 66 of respondents who indicated they wanted to relaunch their career were able to find a job. Interestingly, the boomerangers were ones who would typically take a job that was lower paying and not as high-powered by choice. The vast majority took it by choice because they were a little anxious about their skills. They wanted to prove they could do it. They were trying to figure it out. And then within a year or two, they were back on track. And so 69% indicated they felt back on track within 1 year. So the point being, yes, boomerangers in particular would go back, they kind of struggle to get in, they get in, they would kind of not get in quite where they wanted to be, but in really, frankly, very short order, they were on it, which I thought that's why I call these such innovative, trailblazing solutions, and women just were rocking it, ladies. Now, when we're going through it, we don't feel that way. We feel like we're the one who's not working out and we're getting rejected and it's hard. So I don't want to not credit the challenge there. But there is this beautiful story that no one's talking about how we're re-engaging and making great change in the world. So let's talk about that last group. Yeah. The last group were the group of people who pivoted. They took that period of pause to figure out, okay, I wasn't in the right career, or I'm not really interested in going back to that. I want to do something new. And they pivoted to amazing things. Some became entrepreneurs. 9 or 11, I can't remember, but some, about 10% ended up becoming entrepreneurs, having businesses. And I don't mean to discredit gig workers, meaning, single shingle, consultants. These are entrepreneurs with funding that are building businesses and rocking it. So not to say that those who have single shingle aren't rocking it too, but that to me was really inspiring. There's a whole movement around entrepreneurship. another group actually pivoted to do something completely new. So I loved talking to Marianne Perrin, who was a very senior director in finance and operations at a number of different companies. She paused her career for a number of years and then pivoted to become a professor, and got her PhD, and is now a professor of nutritional science at University of North Carolina. How cool is that, right? I mean, I heard that again and again. That's just one example of many examples of women who pivoted to something completely new. And then there were also, within the pivoter group, social warriors, women, and I would include you in this, Grace, women who really are focusing on making social change. Tina Lee, who is here in the Bay Area, you may have heard of names, she founded Mother Coders. So she was in tech, et cetera, doing kind of all this different stuff, working in government, never really found her soul thing, paused for a couple of years, realized that she wanted to create support for mothers who needed to code, and she's got this incredible nonprofit that she's launched called Mother Coders, training mothers to code. She's rocking it, right? And I mean, and I heard that again and again and again. So the point being, there were all these different paths that women took. We don't hear about that. We hear about how hard it is, no one wants to hire you, that it's just like never gonna be able, and blah, blah, blah. And I don't want to discredit that that's true. There are challenges, but we need to tell those narratives of how successful it can be as well.
But the data show that 66% of people found something. So,
and 69% were back on track within a year. That to me was really inspiring.
I like that.
Yeah, me too.
I'm really interested when I think about the pivoters in your example. What has been fascinating to watch at the Hivery is what I call integration. And that's the idea of taking all of your knowledge and skills and experience and wisdom and passion and things that you bring to the table from all walks of life. And that could be professionally, or the negotiating skills you've learned with your 13-year-old daughter. That can be all kinds of different things. But I think what's fascinating about any sort of new chapter or pivoting is that it creates an integration. And I love that idea of us using all of the tools that we have in this life experience to pivot towards something new. So let's talk a little bit, because I know there are some people in here that are considering the pause. So let's talk about how do we create, and I use the word successful very carefully, but how do we create a successful pause? How do we create a pause that allows us to pause and enjoy the pause, and feel like we don't have to run scared in the pause of like, what should I be doing to keep myself current? Can you talk about it? What I would love to lean into pause.
Right, I would love to, but I'd like to start back a little bit and query why we feel the need to pause. Why aren't we all the 28% who don't feel the need to pause? And I'd like to talk about, for me, and what I learned in my research, again, the women were 35 to 50 typically, so they're older than millennials. They're essentially Gen Xers, were the women of the survey and I spoke to. There were some boomers, but that was kind of the most of the women I spoke to. So why did we, the women of our generation, feel the need to do it? And of course, we need to do it because our workplace is constructed around the ideal worker model. You guys have the idea, no, we can kind of guess it, right? It's the person, typically a man, who can work 24/7, who can travel at a drop of a hat, and who has, if he has someone needs at home, he has someone taking care of those needs at home, right? So we can't, if you're a woman, yes, you can do that, typically if you have someone at home, or you're the one who's bearing the responsibility of that. So which is why we call this the second shift for women, right? So we've got this problem, which is we have a workplace culture in our society that does not support caregiving anyway. Let's go on about what the implications are for that. And this is where my wonky head gets all excited. So if you look at the US, our female workforce participation has completely stagnated for the last 25 years. Dead stop. We have not increased. Right? All these women going to college, graduating 50-50, and yet we don't see it. That number about 70% of moms working, guess what? It's not true. 48% of moms work full time with kids under the age of 18. The rest are cobbling together part-time solutions. So I think we have this mythology about being all in and that's success, and that linear path is the only way to the top. But the trailblazing women I interviewed really taught me to kind of open my mind to the fact that there's another way of being. And what I learned from them is consistently they valued time over money, although they all wanted to be paid well. So it wasn't that they weren't, ambitious, financially ambitious, didn't need to be financially supporting their families, but time is what they deeply valued.
So time over money and meaning, relationships, purpose-driven work over marching up the ladder. In other words, and I love when I say that because time over money, meaning over marching up the ladder, who does that sound like? Millennials! We trailblaze how it can look and does look for millennials. We are going to be seeing, and I'm already seeing it in my work, in my research, in my consulting, we're already seeing this happen in millennials. The first generation, 64 million millennials are about to become parents next decade, right? The workplace is not ready. And it's not just millennial women that are saying, I want work-life integration. It's millennial men. In fact, a study out of Ernst & Young said that millennial men were more likely to pass a promotion, take a pay cut, or change jobs so they get better work-life balance once they became fathers. I think that's fascinating. So the point being, we were total trailblazers. Now, back to the so I just want to lay the foundation. What I learned, the women who truly thrive were women who never, ever took their eye off of their career, whether they were in the paid workforce or not. In other words, they didn't flip the switch and say, I'm now completely focused on my family. They always kept their career alive. And how does that look like? Well, they went to events like this to network, to say, hey, I'm working on this. Or they, with social media right now, the younger generation of them that I spoke to, were keeping their brands alive by really engaging around issues on social media. They were networking, they were going to events, they were connecting. They kept their relationships with their previous jobs alive, so they would connect with their previous employers or bosses or coworkers to sort of say, hey, this is what I'm doing. They also volunteered very strategically. So they were, I tell this sort of story in the book about, okay, let's start with, let me tell you. When I paused, what's an alpha female do? Yes, I was PTA president, right? Of course I was. So, I joke at myself, but there was this one point when my daughter, who's now 20, who was in 4th grade, and, she was getting ready for her class field trip, and they were going to Sacramento, and I was busily packing, little sandwich bags for them. Now, these kids want for nothing. They didn't need me to be doing that, and I don't want to discredit that work. I enjoyed every moment of it, but other women who were strategically being smart were changing how they volunteered their unpaid, what they did with their unpaid volunteer work. One woman I interviewed, I was so impressed. She said, I only volunteered in jobs where I could connect, and it was fundraising jobs mostly, where I could connect with big ticket donors who could get me a job when I wanted to go back in the paid workforce. That's pretty damn smart. I thought that was really smart. Now, again, I'm not here to say, I had great joy packing the bags for my 4th grader. I'm not here to judge that that's not a solution. But what I learned is that there's, you can balance that out with, so that you're doing volunteer or doing work that actually builds your skill set, whatever that looks like. You're negotiating, you're leading teams, whatever. So that was the other thing that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing that the women who had the cruisers, again, those were the highest life satisfaction, they were very strategic about the company they chose to work for. They went in before they had children or just as they were having children and made sure that they had companies that actually supported work-life integration or had bosses that supported them. And when they didn't get it, they left. They didn't question that their human capital wasn't of value. So they ended up finding a solution for themselves. I thought that was really inspiring, that they were that sort of self-directed.
So what if you are in the pause and you didn't do that?
Right, exactly. You mean like me?
Because I think like most of us that take a pause, we like you said, most pauses are not definitive decisions. They kind of happen.
Yes.
And most pauses are not like I'm going to pause for exactly 5 years, and then on the first year of year 6, then my whole world is going to open up exactly according to my plan.
Yeah.
So what if it is a little loose and we didn't do
Well,
this?
here's some good news. Let me say, I would have a very different answer 3 years ago. 3 years ago in Sausalito, I would have told you a very different thing, and I would have told you then, you're kind of screwed. Honestly, now I can see you are so not screwed. And here's what, the world is catching up to meet with us. And I'll tell you why. What's happening is a couple of things. One, companies are finally realizing that, hey, big news, women actually benefit their bottom line. Companies with diverse workplaces, gender diverse workplaces, far outpace in terms of their return on equity and their, stock price,
non-diverse workplaces. So we're seeing all this research, and finally, so that's happening. The other thing that we're seeing is that there's a real commitment, and I actually do believe I do a lot of consulting with companies, and I do believe it's real. They actually want to make sure that women can rise to the top. They're not just talking about it, which they actually, frankly, have been talking about it for 25 years. Now they're serious about it. And so we're seeing companies desperate for mid-career talent. So what are they doing? They're hiring you. So there's this really lovely thing, which I mentioned before, called a return to work internship. Has anyone heard about this? Yeah, okay, so it's really cool. So companies are creating these return to work internships for people, can be men, can be women, it's predominantly women, who've paused their careers and are ready to relaunch. And these internships can be anywhere from 3 to 6 months. They're paid, I think they're always paid. Yes, I think I've never heard of one that's not paid. They're 3 to 6 months. You go in and they put you through an internship, just like if you graduated from college. And 90 to 100% get hired. So it's this wonderful path. And they get hired, and then I talk to the CEOs and the managers, a year after these women are hired, rocking
They're
it.
amazing. Yeah.
Because they're the most engaged, most focused, no disrespect for millennials, but most mature, engaged worker that the employers have. Employers are struggling to get engaged workers. So there's the world is finally rising to where we all are, which doesn't mean it's easy for us. My guess is 5 years from now, it's going to be so easy, relatively. But we're seeing some real shifts, which is pretty amazing.
I love that. So I'm just trying to think in my head of all the things that I've heard along the way when someone is either, often the women that I meet with here have done the pause and are looking at the next chapter. So I do hear, for those of you that are thinking about pausing, I hear about successful pauses all the time. Women that, there was something on regrets. What was the regret statistic?
70, on average, let me be clear. On average, 78% of the women who had paused and relaunched their careers had no regrets at all. Even if it took them a long time to re-enter, even if they weren't quite where they wanted to be, the time that they took to do what was truly meaningful for them, in most cases it was caring for their families, and then the time that they went back into their careers, it all evened out. Now I will say, what's not clear to me was, did they just make peace with the fact that they didn't quite make it to the corner office? Or are they really just truly fulfilled?
Right.
In my own case, I never made it to the corner office, but gosh darn, I've done a whole lot of other really great things that I'm very proud of and that give me deep meaning. So I would say, do I have regrets? I regret the workplace didn't create an environment where I could thrive in the workplace. I don't regret my path, but I think the workplace missed out, right?
And I think that, just to add on to that, I think we start to recreate what our vision of ourselves is.
Completely.
I do not miss for one moment this idea of a corner office.
Right.
I love my office. It's
Right.
great.
Right.
So I think that we start to reframe what success means and what we thought we wanted evolves.
Well, let's change. I'm not sure I would have called the book, although I do like the name. I would not sure I would have called the book Work, Pause, Thrive anymore. And the reason I say that is because if you look at millennials, they're pausing all the time. They just don't call it that, right? They call it gig working. I'm gig working right now, but now I'm going to go off and I'm going to go to, surf and wherever, and then I'm coming back and I'm gig working again. So they don't call it pausing, but they do it all the time. So I think there's this real shift going on. And of course, 3 years ago, we were just starting to see co-working spaces. 3 years ago, we were just starting to see this shift towards gig workers. We're starting to, the world is rising to meet what our needs are, no matter why we pause. Yeah, go for it.
So, I have a question. I'm sorry to interrupt with this.
No, don't be sorry. It's a conversation.
So we live in a very fertile area where you can find a job almost immediately if you're qualified and you want to. What was the geographic spread on the people that you surveyed?
It's a great question. It was national. And I made it really, it was national. However, it was mostly city. Respondents were mostly urban, meaning, urban, suburban. Didn't get a lot of rural responses. And it was mostly East Coast, West Coast, with some Chicago, Texas, a bunch of people in New Orleans. So the point, and I think there was a book group that got together. We got to answer this. But the answer is, it was national, but coastal. But in my interviews, I made a point of trying to reach out of my cocoon to get outside. And that is when I ended up interviewing a lot of women in the middle of the country who were decidedly, their words not mine, middle class, and how they were navigating the pause and what that was doing for them and what that was. So I want to talk a little bit about pause and privilege, if that's okay.
Yes, please. Yeah.
So how many of us think pausing is a privilege? Right? Guess what? Only 5% of women who pause are privileged women. The vast majority of pausers are middle class and under-resourced women. And I say that, and by the way, that we're seeing an increase in 2012, we're seeing an increase for the first time in 25 years of women pausing their careers, and the vast majority is coming from the middle class. So why is that happening? What we're finding is, in fact, that women want to work and can't because of the workplace. So we, women with resources, are downshifting to care for our families, oftentimes because we have partners who are all in. So we've got an ideal worker partner, and we have to figure out how to support them as our family unit, right? For many middle class and under-resourced women, they're forced out of the workforce because they can't afford childcare. And so they're trying to navigate solutions that allow them to figure that out. In fact, it's heartbreaking for me to interview many millennial women who could not work because they could not afford their student loan debt and their childcare debt, their childcare expense. And let me be clear, millennial women are graduating much greater rates than men from college, right? Last year, 60% of college graduates were women, millennial women. Millennial women have much higher rates of debt, school debt, because they're graduating more, they're going to school, than millennial men. So we've got more debt, we're more educated, but we've got more debt, and then we end up having children, and we don't have public policies that support women when they have children, and we don't have childcare, we don't have paid maternity leave. They opt out, and it's not because they want to, they're shoved out. So I really bristle at this concept of opting out because it does speak of privilege. I personally feel I was shoved out of the paid workforce because it didn't create an environment that allowed me to thrive. And I would challenge each of you who think you opted out to really question that about your own journey. For me, it was a real unveiling of my understanding about the whole thing. So
I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, one thing that I love to do in these conversations is I find that so often a point of passion or inspiration can come from your own pain or struggle or challenge. And so if anyone in this room has felt that idea of being shoved out and is looking for their next chapter, I just invite you to think about things that we can do in the advocacy realm that support not just what we're talking about in this room, but a bigger movement of women being able to pause.
So this whole conversation is so fascinating because I've been in that community space my entire career as a writer and a journalist and doing my own thing, but I never quote unquote opted in because I knew down the road that would happen to me.
Yeah.
I was like, I want to keep my eye on this. So now I'm in a pivot myself and I'm building a company.
Yeah.
And as a CEO, I want to create an environment where I can thrive, and I'm not eating ramen noodles anymore, and I'm not pulling all-nighters. It's just not healthy. Mm-hmm. And I want to advocate for my team to do the same and prioritize their health above everything else, because I've seen too many people compromise. So with this, is there a way we engage in this conversation? I had all these ideas going off right now where how awesome would it be if the work that you've done, this conversation here, starts a standardized, label of companies that are work pause thrive friendly. So that when you're searching for a job, and then we as the workers, when we're talking to human resources and we're asking, because I think a lot of us, especially women, we don't ask for what we actually deserve. And it's amazing how many of us, we short shrift ourselves because we think that there's no way they're gonna say yes,
True.
right?
You're absolutely right. I hear this all the time. We under-negotiate. Oh, wait, can I,
Yeah.
did I?
Well, so, yeah, I mean, I kind of want a sticker. It's like, work past drive, like.
Friendly.
Yeah, friendly.
Like glass door for going back to work.
No, yes, there is. Wait, let me start with, yes, there is. Have you all heard about Fairy Godboss?
Yes.
Okay, go, not right now.
But
When
write
you
it
get
down.
it, yeah.
Fairy Godboss is amazing.
Fairy
It's very
Godboss is it's glass door for women by women. So you get to write a review about your company and explain how, and it's anonymous, how family-friendly, female-friendly, work, culture, work-life integration friendly your company is. You can talk about what you're paid. You can do all, is there pay equity? What do they do? And it's totally ripping the Band-Aid off of all of this conversation. So and employers are scared of it, big time, as they should be. So I encourage all of you to tell all of your friends, please go right now to all your social media and ask anyone who's working for a company right now to please type in and do a review on Fairy Godboss. The more power we have to review, the more afraid and the more change will happen in companies. Now, so my day job is as the COO of a company called the 3% Movement. We actually are working within the advertising industry, which is where I came from, to make change and advance women in advertising. So where did 3% come from? Turns out 3% of creative directors, the people who actually make creative, are women. Let me switch that. 97% of people who make creative in this country, make the ads, are men. Now, we just did research a couple of years ago. It's 11% now. Woohoo! So, that's just wrong at every level, not the least of which is as consumers, since 85% of purchasing decisions in this country are made by women, we're being fed stuff by people who maybe understand it, but might need another voice in the room. So, what we've launched at 3% is 3% Certified. We're actually working with agencies right now, and it's really exciting to kind of give them that certification stamp. So we do and what's happening is that people outside of the agency world are reaching out to us saying, we want a stamp, like we want the Work Positive Right stamp. And we go in and do a deep dive and assess their cultures, understand really what is working and what's not, and give them solutions, and then say, hey, you get that golden seal, or you don't, and here's what you need to do around it. So we're starting to see this happen all the time.
Can I build off that a little bit? So I serve in advertising.
Yeah.
I'm getting my pause.
Nice.
I'm probably somewhere between boomerang and pivot.
Nice.
I'm leaning towards boomerang to use the tool chest that I have to get back into the marketplace. And I love the idea of advocacy and trailblazing. And I actually just said to a friend yesterday, I felt my whole career like there were a lot of younger women watching me because I had success. And I was pregnant, and I had babies, and I came back to work. And I felt like they were quietly like, wow, I'm working in advertising, and she's doing that too. Right. And when I left, I felt like there were a lot of people a lot of girls, I'll just say, who were like, oh, what is she doing? And there's a part of me in my relaunch that wants to have a story that I can tell to keep the momentum going. I love the idea of a stamp, of a 3%. It seems to me that it's still very rare to talk about this publicly, you know what I mean? And getting over this bridge of regret, deny, excuse, don't talk about what you did and then bridge the gap. And so I would love you to talk a little bit about either language that is helpful to use when you're coming back in a productive way, and kind of this, this is not really well articulated, but this tension between, there's this one company I'm talking to, and I've decided to take the mode of transparency. I am who I am, I've done what I've done, and I'd rather manage expectations of what I have done and also what I haven't done, because I haven't been in the marketplace. But I don't know whether to, because I don't want people, I don't agree with the oh, I've been doing consulting here and there and sort of making up a little bit of what you've been doing. I don't know whether or not to, at this point for myself personally, to say like, screw you, you know what, here's what I'm doing, and I'm proud, and I'm an advocate, and you can either take me or not, you know, because I feel that the people on the other side of the desk, largely men, are like, hi, so I look at your resume, you've had a gap, what's going on? You've been out of the marketplace. And I don't know whether the right strategy or language is to address it or not address it, and if it is address it, because we're true to ourselves, what kind of language is productive to use, ultimately, if the game is to go back to work.
Right.
Is that fair? Does that make sense?
Totally.
I'm
Great
so
question.
glad you. I'm
Yeah.
glad you asked that question. It was actually my next question too, because if I were to think of one thing that causes anxiety, it's how to describe the gap. So will you talk? Yeah.
Sure. So, getting back to wonky. So there's a really great study out of Vanderbilt Law. This woman is just doing phenomenal work, and she asked that very question. And she globally asked employers, what do you want to hear? And she did all this blind study, et cetera, about what it is. And this just came out last year. And the answer is absolute transparency. Own it. I was out of the paid workforce for this number of years, and what I did while I was out was this. Here are the skills I bring to it. This is why I think I'm a good fit. You know, you may be wondering, can she really not? You mean, call the elephant in the room, right? You may be wondering, can I hack it? You know, and here's what I'm willing to do. Do you want to, I've heard about these return to work internships. Would that work for you? Do you want to try that for a couple years? I mean, you can provide them with that try and buy solution if they're worried about your skills. So the transparency, absolutely own it. I don't think we should apologize for our choices. You should, I made this choice, it was right for me and my family, and now I'm ready to re-engage. A number of women I interviewed actually were laid off, and then their spouse was moved. They got moved. So they had reasons. I was laid off, I got moved, we moved, I needed to do this, and now it's time for, me to re-engage, and I'm really excited. And here's what you're gonna get. You're gonna get a really committed, engaged employer. Now what's interesting is we see two things happen. We see, the hiring managers are often men. So we see a couple things happen where the men are saying, oh my God, my wife did just the same thing as you. I'd love to support you, right? So there's this really cool thing happening where the guys are like getting it because they're living at home and they want to support, the other women. So we're seeing some really great things. Or we're seeing, and this is sort of a red flag, which breaks my heart. We're seeing two things happen with women. We're either seeing women who never pause saying, well, sorry, you didn't, I did it, suck it up, you should too. Although we're seeing a lot less of that, and we're seeing more women say, great, I'm gonna bring you in, I wanna support you. So I heard again and again stories of women who reached out to the network and said, I want to go back into advertising, can you help me? And people just rising to support them. So that was the other thing, is a lot of time I spoke to women who were tentative about re-entering, they doubted themselves, weren't quite sure, kind of had a lot of lack of clarity about what they wanted to do, et cetera. My answer to that is even you're not sure, decide you're gonna go back into advertising and go out there and go and do that. It may be that you pivot 2 years later and you really actually become a lighting engineer in theater, who knows? But the point being that getting back in and the journey of getting back in is and getting the confidence that brings is really inspiring.
And remembering that your network is not networking. Like your network is everyone you know. So it doesn't have to. You don't reserve your statement about this is what I want and I want to go back to work for networking events. You do it all the time. They're telling everybody, people that care about you, the people that care about you, spouses, the people that care about you, brothers and sisters. I feel like the more we can practice stating what we want, the more we find that I see here that and I've said this before, I think that women, specifically, because this is what I do, I think that women's intuitive resting place is to help each other.
Yeah,
so if you ask for what you need, you will find that women are searching, racking their brains, going, who can I call? Who can I connect you with? So talk about it.
Yeah, so I just want to respond real quickly to that, and then I'm sorry. I had so many women say, I don't like to network, and my answer back was, anytime you go into a room, you're going to learn something and you're going to share something. You're going to give something back. And we forget about that. We forget that we have something to share back. I can't tell you how many inspiring women I met who didn't, they were hesitant to tell their stories. And I just, we sisters, we're taking care of each other.
And it takes practice.
Yeah.
It takes practice to tell our stories.
Yeah.
Just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the process of getting back and the women that you spoke with, and whether, I feel like I'm getting this impression that there's like a pause and then there's a thrive and there's sort of this start thing. But for me personally, I'm really interested in this sort of a gradual return back to work, and I'm just wondering if you could speak to that a little
Sure. You're a landscape architect, correct? Okay, so by the way, hire her. I'll use an example of a really cool woman I met, her name's Christy McElhaney. She lives in the East Bay. She is an incredibly talented interior designer. She used to be a software salesperson, in fact, one of the best at Intel. And she, opted out, shoved out, whatever, quit. And she went to her tribe of friends and said, okay, I'm interested in relaunching. I'm trying to figure out what's next. And they're like, duh, look at your home. We all want to live in your home. So she had this natural gift, but hadn't really thought about that as a career potential for her. So she went to her friends and said, I will work for free. Can I work with you to redesign your house? 3 friends later, and she suddenly had a huge business. Now she's got 5 or 10 employees. I mean, it's been 10 years now, but she's rocking. I think she was Traditional Homes, top 10 women to watch or designers to watch. Your friends need your help. I need a landscape designer. We're talking. The point is that I think we forget that we have these skills that people need. And some people don't agree with this, but I think saying, look, I'll work for free. I had a number of women who reached out to people in the corporate world or their companies and said, I really want to get back in. Can I work for free for 3 months? That'll give me, or 5 months. That'll give me something on my resume. No one else needs to know I'm working for free. And so they did their own return to work internship with a buddy or a friend, and next thing you know, they're like rocking it. So I think we kind of have this, to your point, binary, and there's no binary. It's all working. So, yeah.
Sorry, wait for the mic. 1 second. Sure.
The phrase "natural gift" really sort of stuck out. I'm like, well, what is my natural gift?
Yeah.
And so I'm leaning. It's like, well, I'm in a pivot, sort of, and I'm working so that I can keep working.
Yep.
So I'm staying in the game, but I also want to pivot because I'm not the professional person that I once was, and that's okay. So what is next? So I'm wondering I'm curious, what are resources that you could recommend to help, like, what is my natural gift? Where can I find that? How do I begin that journey? And I know it's a lot of personal soul searching and, call your career coach, but just some resources to start that path.
It's great. This is a woman that Grace knows very well. Has anyone and everyone heard about Tara Sophia Moore? Okay. Tara Sophia Moore wrote Playing Big. It's a phenomenal book, and she does a online series, the Playing Big series, I think is what she calls it, where she does, I think it's a 6-month series, and you spend 6 months answering that question for yourself. I've never taken it, but I have met many women who have.
We do it. So I have 2 resources for you. One is we do the Playing Big series here.
Yeah.
We'll be announcing that. So
I didn't know
you
that.
do the Playing Big series with Tara on the phone, and
Yeah.
then you meet here and reconvene. I think it's 3 times, so that you have an in-person experience with that as well. I did the Playing Big Facilitator program, loved it. I'm very dear friends with Tara. She's amazing.
She is.
I love her book. I give it to everyone I know. I used to have like 25 copies and they're all gone because I give it to everyone I know. It's fantastic. Another resource that we do here that's a Hivery program that starts on Thursday is called our What's Next program. And it's exactly what we're talking about right now. It's a 5-week program, and it combines that self-exploration through some very quantitative assessments and some inventorying of skills and knowledge. And it's run by 2 fabulous coaches that are also career counselors. It does start this Thursday, if you're interested. This is I think it's our 6th or 7th one that we've run. We've had over 100 women go through the program, and it's an amazing program. So both of those options are available through the Hivery, so we can talk about those things.
And then I would also like to recommend a number of women who have paused their career for a period of time feel their skill sets are not strong, particularly around social media and technology, et cetera. I'm on the advisory board of this organization called Reboot Accelerator. Has anyone heard about this? Oh, they're awesome. Of course, I'm on the advisory board, so I'm going to say that. Reboot Accelerator, they were founded by us, women who'd paused their careers and relaunched and realized that they wanted to create support for women who had also paused and felt intimidated by the lack of technical skills or social media or whatever. It's less about what's next. It's more about how do you build those basic skills. It's very skill driven. It's very social media driven. They have a 5-day intensive that's coming up, I think, in a week or two. Then they do an 8-week every Thursday or 1 day a week kind of thing. They have like these different programs. I highly recommend them. What's also really cool is they're now getting all this attention, right? They've now got offices all over the country. They're growing like leaps and bounds. Companies are now coming to them desperate for talent. So they're coming and figuring out that they're a feeder. And so companies, IBM, the list goes on forever. They're like feeding into all these companies. So they've got jobs is the other side of it.
I think all of this, like participating in those programs and even what you're saying, but when you come to things like this tonight and you raise your hand and say like, I want to have this conversation, there's so much more happening internally than you even realize. And one thing I've noticed that I think is really effective when women are looking for their what's next, I tell women write every single day for 10 minutes a day for 20 days and call me after. And you'll find that like in 10 minutes a day for 20 days, you can have the weekend off if you need to. You will find that there's two things that happen. One is that you will find recurring patterns in your writing that point to what you're really interested in, that maybe your subconscious won't even allow you to think about. It certainly happened to me with the Hivery. I was a ballet dancer and then I was in marketing. None of that indicates women's co-working space sitting here, right? Like none of it, that's not in the trajectory. But I wrote every day and I found myself writing the same thing every day and looked back in the journal and was like, I've said 100 times, creative women's collaborative space. And I found it in there. So I highly recommend writing. I highly recommend using your voice and talking about the things that you're passionate about, the things that you're interested in, the magazine that you always pick up, the book that you can't stop reading or you've read 8 times, the website that you visit every day. Those are all your guides. You have to look at those very carefully, go like, okay, what's that telling me about what's inside?
You had a question that didn't get answered.
She's been waiting.
Yeah, oh good, thank you.
So my question, I'm, I guess, in the pause/return to work from having a baby, and I'm going to be one of those people who used to work 60 hours a week and now I'm going to work 30 or 35, and I call it a pause.
Yeah.
And so I guess how do we change the conversation on an individual level with people about like the choice that a woman makes, right? To leave work early or to miss something or to not travel, to take certain projects and not others. In my case, these 2 weeks, it's my nanny's in Thailand for 2 weeks, you know. How do you be able to say those things? Whereas a guy would just be able to say, well, yeah, I'm going golfing or I'm going surfing or all these things, but we are somehow don't feel like we can say what it is that we're going to do. And so therefore I feel like it keeps getting buried. And you know, part of it's just the social construct, but part of it is it's a personal choice of how I'm spending my personal time, just like a guy would go surfing. He's going to say, I'm going surfing, right, to his clients, and I somehow can't say that to mine.
So that's such a rich question. So I'm going to try and unpack that because that was great. Thank you. Stanford University is at the Clayman Institute for Gender Studies is doing some really amazing work around motherhood bias, around what women face in the workplace once they become mothers. It's pretty depressing, frankly. So here's an example. 2 resumes. Everything is the same. Same name, same job, same career path. Literally everything's the same. The only difference is the bottom line has, hobbies or whatever, extracurricular, PTA, volunteer or something. I think the exact words were PTA volunteer, right? They then took these out and put them out into the workplace to apply for a marketing job. Jane, without the PTA volunteer, got called back twice as many times as Jane with PTA volunteer. When both Janes were offered the job, Jane, without PTA, was offered salaries that 10 to 15% higher. Okay. When employers were asked about Jane's competency, Jane without children without PTA volunteer was viewed as more competent, more leadership potential, more managerial, etc. There was nothing different except for one sentence. To me, that, and there's tons of other kinds of studies that reinforce that kind of data. We're finding that there's a real bias in this country around working mothers. By the way, when do we ever say working fathers? Ever heard that term? Right? As though it's optional? It's not optional, people. We may not be in the paid workforce all the time, but we're always working. Think about it. Our entire economy, our entire school system is built on unpaid volunteer hours.
What was the number? It's extraordinary.
Yeah,
It's like
billions.
$1.6 billion in 1 year. Tell us that in volunteer hours.
Yes, in volunteer hours. I mean, it just goes on. But wait, let me just.
Yeah, getting back to her question,
Yeah.
I want to make sure we.
So the point is that what I'm hearing you say is you might intuitively know that there is bias. So if Joe says, I'm going to go to my kid's soccer game, everyone says, Joe, you're the best dad ever. If Jill says, I'm going to go to my kid's soccer game, she's not committed, right? Something's wrong with that picture. So I have a philosophy which is probably, a little ahead of its curve, but I think we have to be out and proud and just own it. What we also have to do, because we can now work 24/7, we may not want to, but we can, is not hide the fact that we're working from 11 to 1 in the morning because we went to Joe to, our child's soccer game or whatever. We're all getting our work done, right? We're just not in the office all the time. So one of the conversations you can have is around face time versus productivity. And what we're seeing is people actually do task force in their companies. They're pulling together task forces to have the conversation about face time versus productivity and to unpack that and unpack the biases around that. So it's not a really great solution. It exists. It's really omnipresent.
I do believe that there's something that happens to our physiology and our confidence when we feel like we have to hide anything.
Yes.
So, I know that is a complicated thing to do, but I have watched it here. I think one of the reasons that people feel very comfortable in the Hivery is that they are allowed to be themselves. And we're not asked here, you're certainly not putting up a mask or putting up a layer of protection so that you don't have to hide who you are. I would like to think that the more that we can do that and the more that we can embody that authenticity, we're also more confident, we're more attractive, we're more trustworthy, we attract other women around us that want to support us and emulate that. And men, you're absolutely right, thank you, thank you. I would like to see us being able to tell the truth. About where we're going and what we're doing and where we've been and why we paused and the whole bit. So. And
I think the more of us who are authentic, right, is the more of us who get to be authentic. It's sort of this virtuous cycle of goodness. So, all those women I interviewed that hid their pauses or denied their pauses, to me, did a disservice to the next generation, right? Because they're not speaking our truth. And so it's kind of a burden, but I think out and proud is the only way we can go. But you are trailblazing. So.
All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll start here with Hi. So I want to be authentic. What I'm kind of getting is, and I guess my question is, in your studies, did you find that there were certain professions or types of work, whether it was working for a company or, as a corporate employee for the company, not as an independent contractor, or as an entrepreneur, are there certain professions that are maybe a little bit more conducive to this? Because just to tell you a little bit about my story is that I have worked for most predominantly women-run companies most of my life. I started off working for Martha Stewart and was an editor for her magazine, and that was mostly women and gay men. And, gay men who don't really have a lot of responsibilities for the most part in terms, they're not, in the same way, at least back then, they definitely weren't. But having a similar job to them, and I saw all these women who didn't have time to spend time with their kids and were constantly complaining, and everyone was really stressed out. This is in New York City. It was crazy, and I left because I was like, this isn't what I want. This is not what I want for my life. and I became a freelance stylist. So you know what that is from being in the advertising industry. You know what a photo shoot is like. And you don't get to just like go and pick your kid up from soccer if you are the stylist,
Right.
which is what I am.
Right.
So I've worked for all these women who are at these, not at Martha Stewart, but now at the company that I'm at, which I won't name. I work for them I'm as an independent contractor. It's all women, and they get to come and go as they please. And they get, their priority is their families, and they're always on vacation, and this and that, da-da-da-da. And the people who are the independent contractors are the ones who get holding the bag sometimes, is what it feels like. And we can't just say, oh, sorry, I have to go pick up my kid, or sorry, I have to go do this. And so consequently, I have not paused. I have not felt like I can.
Right. Thank you for bringing up the other element.
And just to add one more thing, I have found that women can be very tough on other women in the workplace.
So you've said a lot, and I want to just sort of answer that. So look, we absolutely punish those with caregiving responsibilities in this country. We do not have public policies that support caregiving. We don't have maternity leave. We don't have paid maternity leave, paid paternity leave. We don't have universal child care. We don't have any of that. Every other major industrialized nation does. Japan, Greece, Spain, they have more women in the workforce and better workforce policies that support working parents than we do. And I don't know disrespectful things, just like my point being, it's not just Norway and Sweden, the motherland in the region. So we really create environments that are hostile to parents or those with caregiving responsibilities. So that's the first thing. The other thing that we have is this rise of, which terrifies me, the rise of the gig worker who does not have any kind of support whatsoever, which means you're only as good as the day you're working, right? So since we don't have universal health care, arguably, since we don't have paid parental leave, since we don't have all of these, we don't have subsidized childcare in any meaningful way, you can only feed yourself if you can feed yourself, right? You don't have the security of a corporate job. And I am fearful of that. And so I talk about this as kind of the golden solution, but in my opinion, it's an interim solution. We're seeing a rise of labor unions around the gig workers. So we're seeing a real movement around that. There's a couple of different labor unions being created around freelancers for this very reason. And so, yes, I hear you. I'm concerned about it. I'm not sure the answer for us is to have more gig workers. I think the solution is actually to have better public policies. But we don't have that. And we're not going to get it anytime soon. So what are you going to do? Yeah, we can go about that path. Okay, so I want to address the other thing, which, we can all be loving Hivery people, or we cannot be. And so there's this lovely table in the room, right? And there's so many seats, right? And if there's only one pink seat and the rest of them are blue, every person who's a woman is going to be, assuming pink's for women, is going to be fighting for that one seat. We have come of age when there's only so many slots available to us, and we're all fighting each other for those slots, which is why I believe we are not as gracious and kind as we can be to each other in the workplace. Forget all the other mean girl crap. I'm just literally talking about the workplace. I do believe that's changing. And I believe that we are getting to the point where we're recognizing that, hey, there's 2 seats here and 5 seats and 20 seats. And by the way, when I actually pull up a chair for you, that, Sheryl Sandberg seat at the table thing, I really deeply see that every single day. But we are still dealing with legacy and with that only one pink seat at the table. And it's not easy. And so, right, it exists. And it breaks my heart. So you're right there. Hi. Yeah. Oh, wait. I want everyone to meet my friend Sharon, who I interviewed for the book. She wasn't my friend. I heard her story. I'm like, I've got to talk to you. And she shared her story, which was so powerful. So thank you. And for being here.
So I wanted to ask you about caregiving across the generations, because I know we've been talking about caring for the youth. That can be very nicely packaged into childcare and 0 to 5 and childcare and aftercare, but care that happens to be dementia or failing care, I don't think has been touched on. And I know Sheryl Sandberg wrote recently a piece in Time Magazine about grief and dealing with loss. And I wondered if you could just talk about some of those things and how they impact unpaid family caregivers and their time away from work. Thank you.
So, Sharon, thank you. And Sharon's, can I say something? So Sharon, I was able to share Sharon's story around how it wasn't just childcare that was her issue. She had two parents who were severely ill, and she was the only caregiver for them. And I think, and God bless you for the work that you did. But I think the truth of the matter is that this book was written for my 30-year-old self. There's another book out there for my 50-year-old self. Because what we're seeing is boomers are aging, Gen Xers are having to support boomers, and I can't tell you how many women I interviewed who never pause for kids, who are quitting their jobs to care for their parents. And because it's too expensive, we don't have solutions, we don't have public policies, and so they don't have a choice. They have to.
The problems are the same.
Sorry?
The problems are the same.
The problems are exactly the same. We don't value caregiving. We don't offer it. And, of course, we don't have universal health care, and it's whatever. So I think it's a real issue, but I think what you also mentioned, Sharon, is the difference. When you're pausing to care for your children, you're building into their future. You're launching them into their glittering future. When you're pausing to care for your parents and you're helping them ease into the next transition, that's grief-laden. It's not joyful. And as annoying as our children may be, of course mine were perfect, right? I mean, as annoying as they can be, it's still a joyful journey. And it's still, it can be all these awful things, but it's still the future. When you're caring for your parents and you're bringing them every day into death, it's a very different experience. And I found grief was very palpable with the women I interviewed who had never paused for children but were forced to pause for daughterhood is what I called it. So yeah, it's real.
So I want to make sure, the last part of our evening tonight was that you would have some time with Lisen to have her sign your book and have a moment to meet her personally and ask any questions. But there's one thing that I think is really important to reiterate about a conversation like this. I thought that Lisen put it really well in the book that she said that we have a tendency to all think that we're so unique in the way that we look at pausing, and we like nobody can possibly understand because I've got this and I've got that, and she did find patterns in those choices. However, we all are individuals, and my gut tells me that someone out there in the group tonight is going, but this. I need something else. I need takeaways. I need steps. I need support. So whatever that is. This is the beginning of that conversation. I definitely encourage you, if you have a specific question for Lisen, you'll have an opportunity to ask that of her. You can also email us later, and we can come back to you with some ideas and some tools from Lisen. So I don't want you to feel like if you came tonight with one burning question and you feel like I really needed a takeaway on XYZ, I want you to feel like you'll have the opportunity to have that. It's a big topic. It's a big conversation. And we wanted to get as much of it as we could tonight. I still have like 5 other questions for you that I'm not going to get to. So we'll come back to you with a recap and with an opportunity for you to ask other questions. And again, like I said, you'll have time tonight to ask anything else of Lisen. But before we break, does anyone have something burning that is there any other last questions you feel like you just can't wait? You're good?
Can I say
Okay.
something?
Yes, please.
So on that note, one of the things I deeply encourage you to do, no matter how much rejection you're facing, no matter how much you feel like you've not figured it out, all of these things, the way that women thrived is they didn't give up. Do not give up. It will happen. It might take you a long time, but it will happen. If you give up, you will never get there. So I tell you, the women who thrived were the women who never gave up. And the women who were discouraged and frustrated and unhappy were the women who did. So please, I beg of you, do not give up. That's my one thing. And the other thing back on advocacy, I firmly believe the number one thing we need to do in this country is get paid parental leave for both women and men. So when you ask, can we as a group make change, I encourage you to find out about what you can do. There's a really great organization called, what's it called? Paid Leave USA, or Paid Leave US. And I really encourage you to go check it out. They're doing some grassroots efforts around getting paid leave in this country. If we don't get that, it's not just going to hurt us, it hurts our economy. I did this analysis. You know how many zeros there are after if we had women full participating in the workforce? There's like 10 zeros. It goes on forever. It's in the trillions. We get a problem. We need to get women working for our economy. And one of the best ways we can do that is not lose them right after they've had children, which the vast majority, 25% of women in this country take less than 2 weeks of maternity leave because it's unpaid. 25% is the problem. Yeah, sorry about that.
I just want to build on what you said about the public policy initiatives that women can take and work together on. I think it's just as important for people that are relaunching and thinking about what else they can do is to actually run for public office. This country needs many more women making the decisions out there. And so you'll find that you'll have a lot of support in a lot of communities on building skills to be able to do that. And as we now know, you really don't have to have a lot of experience. Whatever you have, I'm sure is better than what we have out there. So
yeah. There's a great organization called Emerge, if you're interested.
Yes, Emerge is around the country right now.
It's a great organization if you're interested in any kind of political office, from school board to president.
And then I think just one last thing before we break that I was just thinking about as we were having the last notes. One thing that I've seen as women are looking at their next chapter, and I agree with you, I am open to the idea of internships and working for free. I always say like 3 is my limit. You cannot work any more than 3 times for free or for 3 people or 3 projects. 3, that's it, not 4, 3. And even
3%.
That, yes, for 3 hours a day for 3 days, and that's it. And then it's not free anymore.
Yes.
But one thing that I have, that actually has a number 3 in it as well, which is kind of weird, but I encourage every woman that comes to me and tells me what money she is looking for to increase that by 30% at least. And they always say, no, I can't. I know I'm not ready, but I haven't this and I'm not that. And I'm like, go in there and ask for 30% more than whatever you're thinking right now. And I'm like, it works. It works every time. There's always a resistance, and then they get the money. And I want you to get the money. The value is yours. You have the wisdom, you have the experience. And I think often what happens when we are making a new chapter, we start with this internal apology that comes out in our negotiation. So if you can take whatever number you have in mind and up it by 30% and call me in the morning, because it works. It works, and it's a very important step in owning our value as women. So it's not just about your own individual value or any insecurities or fears that may be troubling you. It's owning our value as women. We have to move the needle. So it's your responsibility to other women to up your whatever you're thinking by 30%. We'll have about 10 minutes together, have a glass of wine, a sip, or a snack, whatever you'd like, and then make sure you get to come say hi to Lisen and have her sign your book. You will hear from us with a recap, and you'll have an opportunity to ask other questions. Lisen, thank you so much for being here. Your work is extraordinary. I love that we sat there 3 years ago and you had this idea, and out it comes with all of this incredible movement around it. So thank you. Bravo.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everybody.